Hi, my name's Nikki. I'm the Obsessive Bookseller, and welcome to my wrap-up for July 2022. I read so many books this month. I'm really excited. This is the first month where I actually caught up on all of the obligation and outstanding reading that I had, and so I was able to pick up, well, kind of whatever I felt like. I had a really strict list of things I knew I needed to get to next, but I was only doing one book at a time, so I felt the freedom when I put something down to pick which obligation I was going to read next. So it took me 4 months of concerted effort, but I finally made it down to just 2 books going at a time, a physical book and an ebook. And it made all the difference. Now granted, my giant stack of books read was only partly due to that. I was reading a lot faster and enjoying what I was reading a lot more. But another factor is I picked up a lot of short books this month, and I also had quite a few carryover physical reads that I wrapped up this month. So books that I'd been reading for a couple months finally got checked as read. Anyway, I couldn't be happier. I'm having so much fun. So let's get into what I've been reading. For my Read Burn Hoard series, I picked up Mistress of Dragons by Margaret Wise. Solid 3-star read. There was a lot of really thin plot elements to this that didn't really make a lot of sense to me, but I kind of went with it. I liked the dragons. I really liked the writing style. She had a very relaxing, flowing, easy to read book. This was very much just kind of a snack fantasy. And I liked it well enough to want to know what happens next, but not well enough to pick it up physically, and not well enough to pay a couple of credits to get the next ones on audio. So kind of at a standstill until the next really good Audible sale. Y'all know how dragon crazy I am. This was not a very dragon-happy book. Maybe the first couple of chapters had a lot of really good dragon elements, but it was mostly human-centric, and even the dragons themselves were more human than bestial. Which, honestly, if you like that type of dragon, it'll probably work for you a little better than me, but I like bestial dragons that behave more like animals than people. I read Locklands by Robert Jackson Bennett, and liked it a lot better than the second book. I was really hard on the second book. This one I read mostly physically and then switched to audiobook. And I gotta say, for this series specifically, physically reading is the way to go, because the audio, the woman just has such a ongoing intensity to her voice, and she never lets up, that it kind of makes you feel like the audiobook is screaming at you the entire time. And there's no like high and low, time to catch your breath, time to really build momentum. No, it's just like flatline yelling the entire way through. Overall, I landed at a 3-star. It's not my favorite. The first book was still the best one in the series for me. Now, take with a grain of salt. I know a lot of people are really enjoying, at least from what I've seen on Goodreads, the ending to this trilogy. And I thought it was a good ending, but when I picked it up, it was for an obligation read, and I wasn't really in the mood to read it. So I was kind of paying for my poor decision to request that arc before I had actually read the second book. And then not having liked the second book, I had no enthusiasm to dive into it. So that definitely skewed my rating. But there were a lot of cool elements on it, and I did like the way it ended. Next, I picked up Weight of Command by Michael Mamet. He's my favorite sci-fi author, and this is the latest from him. It's an Audible exclusive. And we got Misfit Soldier from him this year and Weight of Command. So 2 books from a favorite author in a single year. It's like really cool. If you're like me and you'd rather take a science fiction book to the beach, this would be my pick. It had some serious notes, but for the most part, it was just a light, fun sci-fi read. I love the characters. I love the mystery. I thought the premise for this one was particularly interesting. This girl is kind of thrust into command before she's ready, and seeing her attempt to kind of gain her stride amidst all the chaos was a lot of fun. So yes, really enjoyed that one. I also read The Last Emperor by John Scalzi. It's the 3rd and final book in the Interdependency trilogy, and I didn't like this one. I don't know. For this trilogy as a whole, it's a 3 or 4 star. I really loved the second book. I liked the first book well enough. This one was the weakest for me. And it's kind of weird having a trilogy ender be the weakest one, but there were so many fillers in this book. The first, maybe third of the book was just recap. Like recapping what happened in the first and second book and kind of reiterating how the characters felt about that. And then the second 2/3 of the book was more reiteration on how the characters felt and maybe 1 or 2 meaningful plot advancements. And then the final third is where all the stuff happened. And I thought it was a pretty cool ending. I enjoyed it for the most part. But yeah, evaluating it on an overall, like, is it worth spending the money on the hardcover? Probably not for this one, but like I said, the trilogy as a whole was a lot of fun. Probably gonna do a review for all three of them in like one big go. This one had a ton of filler. If it hadn't been so short, meaning I got through it within a couple of days, I probably would have been really angry if I'd spent hundreds and hundreds of pages going through nothing but recap, but it is what it is. The second book was good enough to merit reading this one, even though it wasn't the best of the trilogy. Like, I loved the second book. It was in contention for my favorite book of the year so far. That's saying quite a bit. But anyway, this is the second series from Scalzi where the end kind of petered out a little bit. Old Man's War did the same thing for me, so maybe his strength is in the standalones. I'll see. I still plan on reading more from him. He's still a very feel-good, lighthearted sci-fi author. And unfortunately for Scalzi, like, he paled in comparison to Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I loved this book so much. This was the Patreon book club pick, and it's my favorite book of the year, easily. Slam dunk. I had heard this one was good, and when you go into a book with a lot of hype, you kind of are like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to like it as much as everybody else, but every single thing that he did in here, every plot choice, every writing tool, all of the background, evidently he's a zoologist and a psychologist. And both of those things just like spark my interest. In another life, had I not gone the practical route and gone for my MBA, I would have majored in one of those two things. So anyway, right off the bat, you get this really deep cultural building from the ground up with these spiders, and it is so freaking cool. And there were a lot of writing things in here where, had I been the one writing them, I would have found it really difficult to figure out how to navigate kind of the complications of it. But he did it so seamlessly. I'm like, oh, that's a great solution for that problem. And some of the things he did, the choices he made, allowed me to be deeply connected to the characters throughout the entire book. And I just, I love the plot. I love everything about this book. It was so good. I was able to do a complete spoiler blog for my patrons, and I don't ever talk spoilers on the channel, so it was super fun to talk about the very specifics on why I loved each scene, and yeah, just cool things about this one. So this is my first venture into Adrian Tchaikovsky, and it will not be the last. I am in the process of maybe ordering a few of his other series and books, and I actually even have a few that have just been sitting on my shelf collecting dust for years. I have the makings here of a new favorite author. To me, his variety of writing, the different types of stories that he tackles, reminds me very much of Sanderson, in the sense that he just has so many ideas, good ideas in his head, and he's a very prolific writer and very passionate about producing a lot of content. So yeah, I can't wait. I've got so many on my list. I can't wait to read more from him. So, favorite of the year so far. After 2 months of physically reading, I finally finished The Southern Fire by Juliet McKenna, and I can never pronounce the name. The Aldebrechen Compass book number 1. It's a 4-book series. I had read this author before I knew I really liked her, and what drew me to the story was this rich world building. This takes place on an archipelago, lots of seafaring travel, tropical settings, different cultural immersion. I think that's my favorite part about the book, is the deep cultural immersion. There's this compelling thread of magic from the South. That's kind of what the whole book is focused on. And for me, this is an incredibly slow burn read. Worth the slow pacing, because I feel like the deep immersion into the culture may not have been possible without that slow pacing. But for me, it's not slow in the sense of like a Hobb book or an Abercrombie book where it's all about the characters. For me, the characters, they're better than surface level, but they're not, like I don't feel it in the core. If something had happened to them, I don't think I would have been upset at all. Like, oh, bummer, you know, and then moved on. So not a deep connection to the characters, but everything else, all of the world building components were so good that I kind of overlooked that a little bit. For me, I tend to evaluate world building higher than other categories. So I typically give books a little bit of slack if they can take me to a new world and really dazzle me, which she did here. And I did love the last 10% to the point where I'm already itching to pick up the second book. It's a shame I have so many other things going on. So now that I'm down to just 2 books at a time, my next goal is to get myself down to less series going at once. We shall see how that goes. I finished The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik. I have had this one on hold at the library since it came out in like October or November, and I've just been like, nope, not this week, nope, not this week. And I had heard that it had gotten turned into a trilogy from a duology, and was worried that this was going to feel like middle book syndrome. I have lots and lots of footage of me criticizing that choice, but having actually read the book, I'm really pleased with it. It doesn't feel like she took what was going to be a second book and stretched it out. It seems like she wrote the second book that she intended and then has enough interesting content to expand beyond that. So it's a bonus book essentially in the series, which is exactly what you want when they expand a series. It doesn't feel like a cash grab. I enjoyed this one thoroughly. Okay, this one is a really difficult one to recommend because while every component worked for me, I know they probably won't work for everybody else. First of all, the main character is really jaded and cranky. She's like an anti-hero in training, and to be totally honest, like as deadly as this school is, she gets in her own way more than the school gets in her way. Her attitude is her biggest problem, and I find that completely fascinating. The school aspect is really cool. It's this place where young magic users go to learn how to survive in the world, because being a magical user attracts magic-eating monsters to you. And in this school, there are no teachers, there are no rules. The consequences of not doing your work and learning how to survive and get out of the school is death. Anyway, the whole concept is really cool. It's a very atmospheric story, and that's probably my favorite part about it, is it completely transports me to another world. Now, the writing style is so different, and this is also another thing I think would be difficult to recommend about it, because it's a very clear style. I can tell it's deliberate. There'll be a little bit of plot advancement where the characters have a little bit of dialogue or an action scene happens, and then it'll be mostly a deep dive into this girl's perspective as she reflects on what happens and explains why things are relevant. And it's a very in the character's head type of story. I mean, it goes on at length in her head talking about things that happened. I'm explaining this poorly, but basically it's like a start and stop. But when you're in the character's head and you're kind of gaining more character depth through her interpretations over what just happened and her explaining what's going on in this world, you're getting such cool information that for me, it didn't matter that it was kind of like basically a book around info dumps, because it was so interesting and it was serving the purpose to enhance character. And without even realizing it, you kind of flow from one action scene to another. And so my brain knows that some really exciting things are happening, even though I'm kind of one step removed experiencing it through an afterthought of this character. It's very weird. But I love school settings, and despite what I've heard going around about this being a YA, I've read so many YA, just because this one has a young female character set in a school setting, nothing about this one reads YA to me. A lot of these characters are young and inexperienced, and so that's addressed in here, but the tone of the writing, the sophistication of everything that's going on, and the focus of the story, which is not on any kind of romance, it's completely on survival. Yeah, I would not classify this one as a YA in the slightest, which is awesome because there aren't a lot of school settings that aren't YA, and I eat this stuff up. So yes, love this one, can't wait to get to the next one. And in stark contrast, Paranormalcy by Kristen White. Every single thing about this one felt YA. In fact, things that happen in this book are part of the reasons why people have such a bad attitude towards YA. There were weird insta-loves and a boy crazy main character. Some of it was a little hard to read, but conceptually, I thought it was pretty cool. There's this institution that sends out hunters to tag and capture paranormal beings. And what I loved most was the variety of paranormal creatures. I thought it was pretty creative, especially as the book got further along, there were more and more types of paranormal that just kind of came into the story, and I found that really fascinating. There was an overall mystery that was strong enough to keep me wanting to read despite some of the flaws. And so I'm basically landing at I can't recommend this because it is nowhere near close to the strongest YA that I've ever read, but I enjoyed my experience with it, and I'll probably finish out the trilogy. I also read books 6 and 7 of Pokemon Adventures. It's the conclusion of the first arc of the series, and it was really well done. I'm not a manga person in general. I haven't read practically any of them, but it was amazing to me how they were able to get such depth of story in such a limited, like, little package. And I think a lot of it is when you're reading a story, they have to take a lot of time to set the setting, to describe what's going on, to give you an image. And here they can skip all that and then just stick straight to the dialogue, and your brain kind of picks up the rest of it. So I have so many Pokemon books to go. So many. This is just like books 6 and 7. But I'm really interested in the series, and like I said, I'm surprised at how much depth can come from a manga. I'm sure at some point when I finish this incredible stack of Pokemon books that I have going, I'll want to try something else just because I'm, kind of just dipping my toes into the genre. But yeah, I love Pokemon. These were a lot of fun. I highly recommend at least the first arc because it was very satisfying. Much better than the Indigo Leak show, which I also loved. But he didn't really capture a lot of Pokemon there. And the ending and the culmination of all that effort felt kind of wah-wah. Whereas in here, it was like, whoa! Can't wait to see what happens next. Who's going to win? That kind of thing. It was pretty cool. I have a couple of books that I'm in the middle of. I started Soul Taken by Patricia Briggs. Oh my gosh, I love her writing so much. I am just so enmeshed in this story with these amazing characters. And I've said it before, but what I love most about this writer is that she has a way of, these people feel real, and they feel like enigmas. Even at book 13 in the Mercy Thompson series, and however many we've gotten in the Alpha Omega, I still feel like I want to know more about so many of the characters. And in each book lately, it seems like she's kind of taken one of the characters and expanded on their story and kind of highlighted their backstories, which I'm just eating up because I'm like, wow, I've known some of these people since the beginning and I want to know more about them. And then she's very subtly making her world more robust, and the politics within this world of the supernaturals and the humans, and it's just all coming together really well. And I love the mystery element she puts into this. I love the main character, Mercy. She's so chill, and she's such a badass. Yeah, completely enjoying this one. It's one of those cases where I'm kind of sad that I've been caught up in the series for so long that I've got to wait an entire year for a new release, but I'm kind of itching to go back and reread the first couple because I loved them so much. Loving that one. I also picked up Shadow Throne, book 2 in the Shadow Campaign series by Django Wexler. I'm not very far in this one at all, so I don't really have anything to report, but this is what I'm going to be carrying over into the next month. I enjoyed the first book. There was a lot of military aspects, not a lot of magic. I'm kind of hoping for more magic in this book. I hear it's a lot more politically driven, which I don't mind. And it is per my project to continue more series and to wrap more things up this year. So me getting back to this within about 3 or 4 months is actually a pretty good turnaround for me, all things considered. Anyway, that's what I've been up to this month. Ton of titles. I'm really excited about my reading habits. Many of these I kind of knew I needed to get to next, whereas next month I only have maybe 2 really pending things that I need to read. And then other than that, like the world is my oyster. I can pick up whatever I want, which is super exciting. Thank you so much for joining me on this wrap up, and I hope to catch you next time. Bye.